Hello, everybody. This is Elke from Fossil Creek Nursery. We're going to be talking about Colorado native plants, the what, where, why, and how. Um, just so you know, I am a plant ecologist by training, so I approach all my landscaping from my knowledge around where do these plants grow and what kind of environment, therefore, do they prefer to be living in. And so yeah, what's the point of growing natives? They tend to be a hair more boring, some of them. Some of them are absolutely stunning, obviously. But why would we want to grow the natives? Well, the simple theory behind it is we're taking up landscape from native plants. Cities and whatnot, they change the ecosystem dramatically. And so, to try and mitigate that somewhat, if we incorporate the native plants in our gardens, then we have at least some habitat preservation, so to speak, going on. The other thing is obviously that our climate here is challenging. And so we want to make our lives easier sometimes and plant things that are already adapted to the native environment. And so what better adapted than the stuff that grows here without our assistance and help and all the other inputs that we generally put into our gardens. So there is pollinators, other plants, obviously are adapted again to the plants that they were growing up with or evolved with. So that's kind of the motivation. The other motivation is also decreased resource use. When we bring plants over here that prefer more moist environment, we obviously need to supplement their water so that they are happy growing in our yards. And similarly, we need to amend soils for many plants because our heavy clay that we have here in the Front Range area, well, just before the Front Range, we're right on the edge of the prairie here, right? And so the heavy clays that we have down here in the relatively flat lands, that is challenging to many plants as well. Again, in addition to having the lack of moisture that we often experience here in the summer. So those are kind of motivating factors that we don't have to put as many resources into these plants once we grow them, once they're established, that they benefit the native pollinators and other wildlife to some extent. Certain species, obviously, we alter the environment too much for them to inhabit our gardens, but still, we're mitigating that effect. And then, yeah, the resource inputs. So what's a little bit tricky is around the native is it is a very broad term. Colorado native encompasses many different ecosystems. We have tree-lined mountain areas where obviously the environment is very different than here in the prairie edge of northern Colorado, versus further south where it gets significantly hotter, and we actually also experience somewhat of a change in soils. So I think there's a fine line. You can be super strict about this needs to be native, let's say, to Larimer County, which is what we happen to be in here in Fort Collins. You can be that strict. It has to be native to Larimer County, but even Larimer County encompasses a range. Once you get up into the slopes of the foothills, the soils change dramatically. And again, so you have different plants that you find there versus down here in the prairie. So it's a little bit of a balance that you need to decide on for yourself. What do you prefer to grow? How native, how strict do you want to be about this? So the big determining factor in this area for what grows where and doesn't grow where is the soil. Because again, down here in the prairie area, it is a little bit heavy, not a little bit, it is heavy clay down here. And what comes with the heavy clays is that it's fine soil particles that can compact quite heavily and that also, to begin with, don't have much airspace. Often plants that are adapted to really dry environments need a lot of air around their roots. And so when we have areas where it's a little bit more waterlogged, then it can be challenging to grow these plants that are really better adapted to a sandy soil. So that's kind of a long old preamble to native plants and what to grow around here. So if you go outside into the natural areas, and again, there's a super fine line between being on the slopes, let's say with Horsetooth Reservoir, where the soils are much more sandier and to some extent gravelier, versus down here in the flatland edge of the prairie area. But anyway, if you go out here in the flatlands, you are in a grassland area. This is the shortgrass prairie, although behind Boulder there's a remnant of tallgrass prairie that survived here through the last few thousand years, where tallgrass prairie migrated further east. But we're here in the shortgrass prairie, and that pretty much means often is buffalo grass, and then the blue grama grass are the true shortgrass natives. And then we often here around Fort Collins, we see the smooth brome out there. And interspersed with that are a few perennials. So it's not just 100% grasslands, but again, there's a few perennials interspersed. If we want to look real quick, I'm going to fetch one of the grasses here. There we go. This here is a version of the blue grama grass. You can tell the blue grama by having these eyelash-shaped seed heads. This here is called Blonde Ambition. It's a selection of the blue grama that has the seed heads are lighter in color than the true native variety. So that brings up actually another good point, is how strict do you want to be? Is this native enough? It is a naturally occurring variant of the bluegrass that was found by a nursery professional, and he then proceeded to propagate it. So it's not like some plant breeder did some fancy footwork. This one was found in nature, again, with the slightly different colored seed heads. So that is one of the natives. There is a cousin to it, which I'm going to fetch right here. This one, let's see if you guys can see that. I'll hold it in front of this camera as well. I got two cameras going here. This is side oats grama. You can see that the little seed heads are dangling here off the side of the stalk. It's another great grass, gets a little bit taller than the blue grama itself, and quite attractive in my opinion. The other one that we find a lot in these parts is the little blue stem, which gets yet a bit taller. So that one is more trending towards medium tall prairie grasses, which generally a little bit further east where there's a little bit more moisture. So if you can see this guy has quite a bit of color. Whoops, it's a big one. Playing with the camera here. Anyway, this has quite a bit of color in its leaves, and especially come fall, it gets lovely red to it. Let me see if I can't show you. This is what the seed heads look like right here for the little blue stem. So those are great grasses to add into your landscape. The beauty of them is you don't mow them. They're clump grasses, bunch grasses, which means they make a clump and not send out a bunch of runners like your lawn would. And they add lovely texture to your yard. And again, there's native options. We don't just have the Carl Förster feather reed grass that seems to be ubiquitous in this area, which is not a bad one, but you know, we can diversify. So within these, you find some perennials. This one right here with these lovely pink flowers. See if I can get them. Yeah, they have some white in the center there. This is more of a ground cover. Calera, or the poppy mallow, is another great native plant that you can mix in there, and it will spread out and can seed itself quite easily, actually. It is one that does well in both the clays and a little bit more of a sandy soil. I have another one that's blooming right now. This one here is a prairie coneflower. This is the yellow one, which is the true native one. There's also more of a maroonish, brownish color one that is not strictly native, but can hybridize with this one. And sometimes you find plants that have both yellow and the maroon flowers to them. Again, prairie coneflower, this one. And then a really cool, super fun one. I love walking by these. Smells so good. This thing is called a chocolate flower. It's kind of this yellow daisy with brown centers. I think you could see it right there. And they smell amazing, especially if you have a bunch of them together. You walk by there, it just smells like chocolate. And some are flowering, which is really, really awesome. Another one that is super easy to grow is not blooming right now. It's more of a spring bloomer. This is a Rocky Mountain penstemon. There is the leftovers of the flower with a few seeds on it. Super easy to grow. Throw the seeds out there. It'll do its own thing. And again, stick them in the ground, grow them. Will need super few additional inputs. This one here is a coneflower. It's a narrow leaf coneflower. That one is actually native behind Boulder, so not strictly native here in Larimer County, but again, Boulder is close enough, in my opinion, that we can plant this particular variety. So it's not exactly the same as the purple coneflower that you see in a lot of yards. This is a narrow leaf variety, and you can also see the flower petals are a little narrower. They're not as super bright purple as you would find with the ones that you often see in nurseries and garden centers and that have been bred extensively. Those are native a little bit further to the east. Another summer flowering guy right here, Liriatris. This is again a variant. There is a true native. This one is called Cobalt. It is, let me see. It is actually a different species. I just brought this one out because it's blooming. The ones that I have that are native are currently not flowering yet. But anyway, the Liriatris is another great one. These here do like the more sandy soils. And then I have another one here for you that is a little bit sleepy right now. There is a couple of flowers right there. But let me show you this one here. Globe mallow, orange variety, which you will find hiking up at Horsetooth Reservoir. Again, this one wants its soil to be more sandy. That is its preference. So even though we're native within the county, relatively close to where we're actually located here on the more prairie areas, this one is one that wants a little bit more sandy soil. There's a couple of other ones that I don't have flowering examples right now. They disappeared already. Butterfly milkweed. Super fun flower that is awesome for our butterflies. And then it also comes as a swamp milkweed, which is more of a pink colored flower. because we do have some areas where there's wetlands. So just because most of our area is really dry doesn't mean we don't also have native plants that need more water. So swamp milkweed is a really needs more water. So that is kind of a quick rundown. If you want to have a more extensive plant list of what is truly native in, in this area, I would refer you to CSU. They have a globe mallow and rabbits. Ah, there's a comment. Really? I think they should be okay. Usually the globe mallows do have a little bit of a scent to their leaves, so they shouldn't be as sensitive to being chomped on by the rabbits as some of the other plants. But when it comes to any kind of resistance, it's more degrees of resistance. A hungry critter will chomp down most anything, and rabbits can be actually extremely destructive. I've seen them chomping down on creosote bush in the Mojave Desert, and if you know anything about creosote bush, that stuff is about sticky and nasty as it gets. So that is kind of the caveat here. Yeah, plant cottonwood so you get your hawks growing and have the aerial patrol take care of those critters. That's my pitch for cottonwoods, which happens to be a native plant. Gets ginormous, obviously, and not suited for every yard, but we should keep planting cottonwoods. We should be planting cottonwoods just to keep our birds of prey happy. What I was going to say is CSU has these, the extension service, they have Colorado divvied up into different areas, the prairie plains area, and then the foothills area, which technically Fort Collins falls into, but again, Fort Collins is a little bit of both. They have a nice little brochure with some plant lists. Right there is a lovely table of what would be native. This one is the prairie one, and then they have one again for the foothills. Gives you all kinds of information about the different plants, and so go by these lists. Again, you don't need to stay strictly within these lists. Plants are also there to serve our happiness. So if a plant makes you happy, by all means, stick it on in there. It's fine. Oh, there's a couple of new comments. Where are they?
I think it might have just been those two.
Oh, these the two. Okay. We're good there. So yeah, again, go online resources. Nurseries like us, we have native trees, we have native shrubs. We try and expand our native collection of perennials to the best of our abilities. Availability can be a big issue in finding these because often our garden perennials were bred to grow prolifically in a happy environment, whereas some of these natives, again, are a little bit more tricky and getting going. So availability of them can be limited, but nurseries like us and other places are working on increasing our selection of native plants. And I had more this spring. They did run off already. So call around, look around, and yeah, come in and ask us about plants. And with that, unless there's any more comments here, I'm gonna bow out. All right, guys, thanks for showing up. And goodbye.